Hey, what's going on, everybody? Looking kind of rough. It's all good. I hope it's all good. Maybe I shouldn't be looking rough. Probably shouldn't be as rough. Hey, I'm going live. I got something on my mind. Everybody may be out partying. It's probably too late to get a lot of y'all in here. Not that I ever. It is what it is. But I just wanted to. Had a lot on my mind. Um, had this show today. My name, for anybody who doesn't know, my name's Montoya, aka Black Socrates. So, do a show every Saturday morning, 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And so we did this show today. Do black men oppress women and gays in the community, in the black community? Do straight men oppress women and gays in the black community? So pretty heated discussion between me and my co-host Christy Gaynell, to the extent she almost got off the show with me, or whatever. I'm gonna be a little facetious. I kept telling her to stay on topic and cut her off, and she hates when I cut her off. So to be honest, the conversation did get heated, but it was more or less me cutting her off, which I do have a bad habit of doing that. So apologize, Christy. But the reason I'm going live, and I guess I should hold this in a way so it doesn't move. So that's probably making it bad. Let me do that. All right, there we go. So I had a special guest on, Dr. Shauna today, and we ended up talking after the show. She was like, "What was the feedback?" And we ended up having a great discussion not too long ago. And so we got into some of the, just me and her discussing, we got into some of what, in a sense, the semantics that came out on the show from the standpoint of one of the guests called in, and he was pretty avid that black men don't have the power to oppress our women or whatever. So we ended up focusing mostly on the women conversation. We actually didn't even get to the gay community in reference to this conversation, just to throw that out. But I still recommend people go hear the show. But the caller called in very passionate about saying that men do not have the power to oppress. Um, and my co-host said, yes, we do oppress, and the video that we were using said that we do oppress. And so the caller was making the relation to oppression being systematic and a sense of power to control things, and saying that in this country specifically, African American men hadn't been in that place. And so when I was talking about Dr. Shauna after the show, we were able to get to an understanding that that systematic oppression has that it has a power dynamic. And she said, but these other issues in which culturally we do things that are not favorable or right to black women or gays for that matter, she was like, we need to have those discussions too. And I agree with her, and we've had some of those very discussions on mental dialogue. And so when we were coming to that understanding, saying that when we're talking about this from a power dynamic and men not having the power to do so, and she kind of agreed to a certain extent. Like I said, we were trying to figure it out. She ended up just continuing to harp about the things that we individually need to talk about. She was making a great point. And she said this one thing, and this is kind of what made me do this live. I'm sorry for setting it up for so long. But she said this one thing. She was like, because she's a social worker, so she sees kind of the worst of the worst, right? And so she was talking about, for example, that um, in the gay community, she had to get off the show, so she didn't know we didn't end up touching it in the second hour. So she was like, "I wish I could have stayed on for that conversation because in the gay community, a lot of gays are violently attacked by black men." She was, explaining this to me, and she was like, "And we have to talk about that." And so wasn't aware of it. I don't know any black men that do it, and I'm not saying because I don't know any that do that it doesn't exist. Like, I definitely understand. She knows for a fact that this happens, especially being a social worker having to deal with it. So very aware that even though I didn't know that this was a big thing, as she's saying, I listened to her saying that, and I thought about it. And she's saying, when are we going to stop arguing and talk solutions? And this is an issue that we need to talk about. And then quite often as black men, when we're saying, well, we're fighting against this systematic racism, and she's saying, well, yeah, men are always glad to talk about what the system is doing to us, but black men don't want to talk about these issues in our community. And so, as when we hear a sister saying that, and I thought about this after the fact, and this is what made me go live. It made me, when I thought about it, and I'm like, yeah, when we're hearing that, not doubting that it's real, like what she's telling me is probably very true, but men, we're going, well, how is that a priority when this systematic thing is affecting our entire community? So for us as men, we're kind of thinking, hey, this should be a priority. And all she's saying is, what's up, Tangela? So all she's saying is, well, this is very important too. And I thought about it because she was like, and we gotta have this conversation so we can have some solutions because this is going on. And I'm still thinking to myself, and I'm just thinking about it, and after the fact, the more I've thought about it, I'm like, well, that's still kind of low priority, even though there may be some asshole men out there that are targeting gay men or gay people and beating them up. Like that's whack to me. So I'm not acting like that's okay. So I'm not marginalizing it but it's a low priority. But if we did have the conversation, I thought about this. I said, okay, I thought this after the fact, so we didn't have a chance to talk about it. This is why I'm going live. I said, well, if we did have those conversations, the individual conversations, say, okay, if we find out this is a thing, a problem that's going on, and I thought about it, I'm like, well, the solution would be if because she thinks we're unwilling to have the conversation, and it made me remember, I'm sorry for rambling, y'all, just work with me. It made me remember something else that was said on the show. She was telling me how that in the Bronx, when she is a woman and her girls, when they walk down the street, that black men might catcall them to a certain extent, and if they didn't respond correctly, she said in the I think she's Bronx or Brooklyn when she was younger, that they might get a bottle thrown at them. And I'm like, dang, I think it's whack that men catcall, or I may have even catcalled a few times in my life. I'm not saying it's okay, but I'm like, and I said on the show, I was like, what's a whole nother level that a person would go as far as throwing a bottle? I've definitely heard and have even witnessed, men going as far as cussing a woman out for not responding properly to, even as I said on the show, even if a man walked up and approached you respectfully, but then cussed you out because he didn't like your response. Like I was saying, these are things that are problems. And so, but in thinking about the solution, then I started thinking about it. A guy that would throw a bottle at a woman for saying no. Then she is a woman, she's a doctor, social worker saying, and we need to talk about that men, out here beating up these gay people. Like she said, these are real important issues that black people sweep under the rug that we need to talk about. And I thought about it. And I'm like, okay, these are terrible human beings that would do something that's crazy. But these terrible human beings that are willing to throw a bottle at a sister because she doesn't respond correctly, or a terrible human being that tests gay people to the point that they're going out and beating them up, I'm sitting here going, this is people without any raising, that have not been raised properly. They haven't been raised at all. Because I'm like, I'm thinking, who would do that? So in having the conversation that this sister says so very important to have, I realized that the solution would be to have more families raising children who would act properly. That if we had more families, married families, where we're raising people properly, then we wouldn't have this level of dysfunction of guys who not only are catcalling women, but throw a bottle at her. Like if I forgot to say this at the very beginning. I'm not married. So people always will dismiss me suggesting that marriage is so important because I haven't been married. I get dismissed so easily, and that's fine. You can cut it off now. Let me go ahead and because people might be wondering, are you married? How is this about marriage? I'm about to bring it full circle. Well, I watch people who are married make the suggestions of how important marriage is, and people dismiss them for their own reasons too. I just get easily dismissed because I haven't gotten married. Fine, if you want to dismiss me for that, please go ahead and do so. But when I'm thinking about what this sister is saying is, what she says we need to have these conversations that, as I just said in the very beginning of this video, that as a black man thinking about systematic racism versus these individuals who act so improperly, as a man thinking logically from my standpoint or other men who call the show, we're gonna say this is a bigger priority than this situation here. But then I realized that if I was willing to have the conversation, and we've done it on the show. When I have this conversation, we say, well, what's the solution? Well, one of the biggest solutions to not have people out here acting so dysfunctional is to be raised in a family structure that teaches you how to act functional. So, because what we're doing currently right now, for example, when I say marriage before children, that's one of my favorite hashtags. People will denounce the idea of getting married for all of these reasons and how hard marriage is, and say, well, we got to get ourselves individuals fixed first. And I don't disagree with getting yourself prepared to be married. I don't disagree with that. But when we start offering marriage as this major solution culturally, considering that in our community, in American culture, let's be honest, there's not enough of us married that are staying together, that when I start offering marriage as a cultural solution, it's actually a solution to a lot of these ills that we say we need to talk about. The idea of, young men who will catcall a woman and disrespect her when she says no. The idea that there are men, boys, or whatever that'll go out and seek somebody who's gay and beat them up. Even the sexual violence and the sexual abuse and the child abuse, have they happened inside of family structures? Absolutely. Do we do a good job as a black community of denouncing these things or calling them out? No, because when they happen on our own, we have too much pride. We don't want to embarrass the family. So even inside of a family structure, we have these issues. But when we start seeing the numbers increase of sexual violence and sexual abuse and things of that, when we watch these numbers increase, well, they increase even more outside of a family structure. So the foundation to having some of these problems alleviate, whereas we will say we need to discuss them openly and come up with these solutions. Well, I thought about it. I'm an after-school teacher. I used to mentor kids, and when I was mentoring kids, I was go maybe once or twice a week, spend an hour with a kid at a school that needed a mentor. Typically, most cases didn't have a father in their life, and so you try to stir the child right in that little bit of time that you have. But I'm realizing that ultimately, this kid is still maybe returning back to a neighborhood where they're learning manhood from other boys or other young men who didn't have fathers, generally speaking. So they got a lot of time with those young boys influencing them, and 1 hour with me in an entire week, trying to influence them in the case where they don't have a father in a lot of instances, right? And so my 1 hour of trying to input some good stuff that they're not typically hearing up against being in a circle of young men without fathers. So can we at least understand that circle can perpetuate more of these issues, that when this sister tells me we need to talk about that there are boys, who is just unheard of to me, that there are boys or men that are going out and violently harming, these gay men. This is crazy to me. I'm actually realizing that these are a bunch of young men that have not been raised properly. And in a sense, what chance did they have to be raised properly outside of a family structure? Again, a solid family structure. Not saying every family's gonna get it right, but when we literally compare the statistics of how children come out from married families, there's plenty of studies on this. Like, don't take my word for it. Plenty of studies, just to give for me saying it generally. But for example, for black married couples, their children, for just even the idea of living in poverty, about 8% within the black community, 8% of those children live in poverty. Within single parent homes, even um, homes of living mates, all kind of structures outside of that structure. The numbers go up to anywhere from 24 to 33% of those children are raised in poverty, and it goes as high as 40% if that, generally speaking, when the woman's doing it alone. 40%. So what happens is there's 60% of women on their own where their children are not living in poverty. So we know that, in a sense, quote unquote, people could be successful outside of the family structure, even when it's just a woman by herself. 60% of them are not, quote unquote, living in poverty, right? But when you compare 24, 33, and 40% in these other structures versus 8% living in poverty in a family structure, that is really no comparison. And so when people are advocating for marriage and people fight against it because unfortunately, we've normalized what we're currently doing, then there's this huge fight. We're fighting it because we've normalized this other behavior. And so what I'm thinking about with that sister, and again, I may not be making that much sense, but what I'm thinking about with that sister saying we need to talk about this one issue that, as a man, as I said in the beginning, is not equated to a systematic issue, like a systematic issue that tears down our families, for example. We think that's a bigger priority. Well, what happens is when she says we need to talk about that, what we're really kind of saying is, well, now that we have this level of dysfunction, how can we solve it with what we're currently doing? And I'm not saying that's not a conversation we don't need to have, but if we were to focus on having more families, if we started encouraging marriage before children and understanding how much good stuff systematically falls from a strong family structure, as I've said so many times, you can't have strong communities without strong families. And what is the building block of a strong family? Husband and wife married. That is the cornerstone. Without that cornerstone, the house leans. May stand up, but it leans. Prefer to be in a properly structured house. So what I just said is not a situation that every married couple kids turn out fine. But there is no statistical comparison from all the studies, financially, emotionally, mentally. If I got a chance to try to roll 5 dice to get a high number, or roll 2 dice, I could roll a 12 on 2 dice and technically roll a 5 on 5 dice, right? 5 1s, 2 6s. The 2 dices beat the 5. So it can happen, but generally speaking, although 2 dice may beat 5 dice some of the time, generally speaking, I would rather start with 5 dice. That's what, when it comes to our children and these issues that we're seeing in the community, we can start out rolling 5 dice and have that many chances to get it right with our children versus continuing to roll 2 dice and justifying how we're living. It really could solve a lot of the individual issues that are real problems. Real problems. For example, one thing that cuts down on crime in general, all types of crimes, and even to the violent crimes. And then when you think about violent crimes equating over to our women, things that can cut down crime, jobs is the one thing that cuts down crime all over the world, not just in America. Where there's job opportunity and people are working, there is less crime in those communities, right? That's a reality. That's the only thing that's factored out. It ain't the amount of policing, jobs, and we're witnessing that right now. The crime rates are decreasing. Have been for 40 years, honestly, but we've had a little spike in the last few years. But right now, we're seeing jobs coming to America. You're gonna see less crime. It always happens. It's how it drops. So when we're having these issues of crime, You know who don't commit crimes? Generally speaking, children that come from married families and people that stay together and generationally keep raising good citizens for society. Generally speaking, you have all the people that are incarcerated. One of the biggest common denominators is not coming from a marriage structure. There are people in jail who have came from married families. So don't talk about the exceptions. They are the exception in comparison. It ain't even close. So when one number, if 60, 70% single coming from single parents, and 30%, 70% is a lot more than 30%. So not an exception as a 1 of 100, but just it's not an argument. It's like, but we like to argue. We like to point out all of those who don't fit the criteria for something that we don't like. So you'll start telling me the stories of the people that are in jail that had two parents. And I wouldn't disagree with those stories, but I can go look at the numbers and say, well, yeah, but they're falling to 30%, and the rest of this. So let's affect that we got 70%. That's a bigger problem. So let's talk about the bigger problem. So 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 if we lower crime, if we fight systematic issues in the community that are against the family structure, if we fight those things, then you're gonna solve things from the standpoint of functional men at home in a family are gonna protect their daughters from a lot of the BS. So yeah, of course, I know you got the example of the dysfunctional man that actually perpetrates the issue in the family. Again, I understand that. I understand that that's been a long time going on in our community. So I'm not acting like it hasn't gone on. But you know what also is going on more so now? It's live-in boyfriends, the in and out cats who don't have no attachment to the children. So we know that's a reality too. Now, if I have to compare how much that's happening with married couples versus what we're currently doing, it ain't close again. So again, I know people really hate this idea of how important marriage can be a solution to a lot of our issues. When I say solution, not end all, it cuts it all out. But when we say we have in these ensuing problems, such as how men treat women and things of this nature, well, in a cyclical situation in which boys are being raised by other boys, because that's their access. And again, yes, get your child a male mentor, get a coach. All of these people have great influence, but sometimes the access is not enough, and so you can't overcome kids learning from other kids. And again, this is cultural, but imagine what kids learn in neighborhoods in which their family structure is a bigger part of the community. So those kids learn the same good stuff that they learned at home. But if you are in a neighborhood in which a lot of the boys is not getting that training, and so most of your friends don't think or train as you do, that's the influence. Even if you got parents, but if most of your boys say this is what's right, and your peers are influential, your parents are your biggest influence. Parents with an S, your mother or your father, if it's single, or is a big influence. But it's better to have those two influences reinforcing up against your peer influence. So, from a cultural standpoint, having more families ensures a strong community. So, I cannot speak upon how important it is to get married. I want to be married. I haven't done it. It doesn't make me wrong because I haven't done it. It doesn't, when I say married, I'm not talking about suggesting or believe that it's easy, but we definitely, in my opinion, have a major misunderstanding of what marriage is for today. So some of the difficulties that we're facing within the community is getting lost and overplaying what marriage is, which makes it, these expectations make it much harder for people to remain together because we've lost sight of marriage's wealth. We've lost sight of marriage's legacy, in my personal opinion. When these are things that families can culturally pass down. So when you understand the importance of it, then in my opinion, now myself, I want to match up with somebody who understands that even more so than the individual I love you compatibility aspect of it. That's very important, not dismissing it whatsoever, but quite often people are getting married on that alone. And when that feeling goes away, now there's these huge issues because they didn't start out thinking of future and legacy from the beginning. I think just the idea of legacy and I'm obligated to these future generations plays a big role in what you're committed to and what your expectations are. You're willing to put in the work per se. You're willing to make it work because you're committed to something bigger than yourself versus the individual feelings that we're getting taught for what marriage is now. So we see marriage on decline overall in society, but that's twofold for our community, whether we want to be honest about it or not. But I don't give a damn what society's doing. We can culturally implement the marriage again within our community. That could be our focus and save our community. So I'll quit rambling on about it. I don't know if I made a lot of sense. I know it was kind of all over the place, but just wanted to get it off my chest. Thanks to y'all, everybody that was watching, and I will hopefully some people see it and maybe understand where I was going. I might have been rambling too much, but that's all I got. It's my 3 cents for the night. The importance of marriage before children. It can actually solve a lot of the individual problems that we keep saying we need to discuss versus trying to discuss how to operate in dysfunction. Let's get married first, get healed. Let's get healed to get married. All that goes together, but let's focus on that and watch how many things improve that we're complaining about now within our community. I'm out. All right, let me see here before I go. Mustafa, let me see what you're saying. All right, let me see if I'm going to read this real quick and respond. It says, I'm hearing that a significant number of black women who find a way to raise their children are males who choose not to marry the women they impregnate. When we determine why males are comfortable walking away from their children, then we'll have a solution. I personally believe it has to do with a sexist, toxic definition of masculinity that socializes boys to feel entitled to sex without preparation for the responsibility of caring for children, and also tells girls to keep their legs closed, but also holds them accountable for children. I kind of see where you're going. I'm a little concerned when I listen. I don't know if anybody understood that, Mustafa, but I'm a little concerned. I'm not a big fan of the term toxic masculinity. I think that word is kind of being delivered to us from an agenda that's against our community. So I'm real skeptical of latching on to those words, because I think the simple way of saying what you're talking about is let me see. When you said solution, let me get right on that part. Let me do that real quick. Let me see if I can see it again. Hold on. You said you think the solution is. I want to talk about that part. It says, when we determine why males are comfortable walking away from their children, then we'll have a solution. I think the why is very simple, bro. I think the why is now we're in the cyclical aspect of marriage without children. I'm sorry, I said it wrong. Children without marriage is what I meant to say. Like at this point in 2018, like we always hear that number that some people don't like to talk about, that 73% of our children are born out of wedlock in the community. So if this is my personal opinion. So now we're in the cyclical aspect. So when we determine why boys are okay with walking away, well, now you're talking about boys whose father wasn't there already. So that's normalized. Like it's normal not to have to, because they don't have that experience. So now that we're at such a high number, so you probably know about the Monahan report in '65 when they were saying it was epidemic when we were at 25% of children born out of wedlock. So at least at that time, most boys grew up with some type of an example. When we didn't do anything about it per se, and I can, I don't want to prolong this live, but we really didn't do anything about it. Even when the Monahan report came out, we just kind of labeled it as racist, but didn't really address changing it or improving it. If you listen to Malcolm X during those times, Malcolm X, you can listen to a speech that he was applying about the number of out of wedlock children we were having way back then, when it was only 25% per se, because we can say only compared to today, right? But you can put his speech that he was using then, and you can put it now, and you wouldn't know the difference. The difference would just be that it's now in the Black community normalized to not have your father there. So I'm just saying that, unfortunately, when we determine the why, well, the why now is cyclical to the point that it happens, unfortunately, naturally. So now I personally believe that it takes campaigns such as this. It takes discussion, propaganda, good propaganda, to now put marriage in a good light. Because the reality is, marriage has such a negative light in today's time, and people dismiss it and downgrade it. And again, I'm not married, so people are going to dismiss me simply because I'm not married. But I see people that are married that are saying this in a much better way than I'm saying, that get fought against and dismissed just the same. So all I'm doing is repeating what I'm seeing these couples who I consider successfully raising their families and understand the importance of legacy and ensuring that they are there, both parents raising their children. So when I'm watching them and learning from them, and I'm just coming over here repeating it. Again, I was kind of believing this was a solution before I got attached to these groups or these people who are being very successful, in my opinion. And when even people hear that, they were like, "Well, people show you anything." It's just people fight everything. So I'm saying, Mustafa, all I'm simply saying is, when you say we got to figure out the why, even though it is natural now, the flip is to, in my opinion, start telling the next generation that it's more important that you are more of a man to find a woman, marry her, stay with her, and raise her children. Like, we need to teach that as manhood, and we can only have a chance at saving our boys by agreeing that this is a common message that we need to talk about and say. Because basically what's happening now, that number has only got higher and higher and higher over the years, and we can't turn it around if we don't talk about it. So I think it actually starts with messaging. It's the same way, I always say it's the same way, like, we get upset because our community lines up for Jordans. Like, we're very upset about that. Like, why would they line up for Jordans? Well, the answer, when we say, if you actually think about the why, there's a whole lot of millions, possibly billions, but definitely millions that was spent in marketing to make our community think these things are worth standing in line for. So, like, we're mad at people who are standing in line as if they hadn't damn near been programmed their entire life to stand in line. And of course, all of us that don't stand in line, obviously we didn't buy into the programming. But when we say why, like, we're looking at them like something's wrong with them, but not being very honest about that the marketing that was done. So when we recognize them, you're like, well, they shouldn't accept the marketing. I didn't accept the marketing. Cool that you didn't, but I understand why they did. They were allowed to watch too much TV, allow a lot of things that would allow, probably outside of a good family structure in some cases, in a lot of cases, let's just be honest, to be exposed to the other partners telling them, hey, the only way to be cool is with these Jordans, and messaging and admiring and honoring these men, because you don't have a fight. Like, Michael Jordan even said he never wanted an autograph because his dad was his hero. I remember getting like Dan Marino's autograph when I was young, and being a big follower of Jordan, for example, and reading that made me realize, hey, I shouldn't put no man above. Why is somebody's signature important? Like, reading Jordan say that made me never get an autograph again. I came down here and got into the music industry, and I wouldn't even take pictures, not on some hate stuff, just when I would meet, a lot of superstars. Like, I don't I didn't take the pictures because I didn't want to use, pretend like I know this cat to get on, or put myself in no status or whatever. Because they put their pants on just like I do. But it literally took me, because I'm a product of a single parent home, but I had a village. But I'm a product of it too. So I'm actually remembering doing some of the same things I'm saying, how it happens. I'm honoring and admiring these other men or whatever. Luckily, my father came heavily back in he was in my life, but he was there on a consistent basis by the time I was in high school, which I think is so important. Whatever, definitely made a big difference. Saved me from going in routes that I could have went just based on the things I was able to learn from him at that age. So I don't want to put it out there like he wasn't there, whatever. But and my mother, who I know agrees with me wholeheartedly, wonderful single mother, but she'll agree with me as a single mother. Like what I'm saying is not denouncing single mothers. It's just culturally, it's come a time where we have to reestablish. Let me see what the comment I got here. Got some comment here. Yeah, no doubt, Mustafa. Yeah, no, absolutely. No, absolutely. I was just talking about, I hope you understand what I was just simply saying, Mustafa. I was just simply saying that, being a kid that admired Jordan and, reading him say that his father was his hero, it actually made a difference for me. But I also understand why people stand in line. Like I don't spend time being mad at our community standing in line for Jordans when I understand that there were millions of dollars spent in order to have them stand in that line, and understanding that a lot of those kids were exposed to it even more so than quote unquote other communities. Because sometimes we get mad at our community because it seems like other communities are not getting the same messages, but they're not in line. Well, generally speaking, I'm just generally kind of saying, like, it's gonna be a little hard to get caught up in that madness in a home with your dad being your hero, who ain't finna let you stand in the line for no Jordans, generally, to a certain extent, if that makes sense. I'm just saying that when we culturally have more families, you're gonna see less of this dysfunction. There's no arguing that. The numbers prove themselves without me bringing a whole bunch to the table. The numbers prove themselves. So it is time to recognize marriage as being the 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 first defense against even systematic attacks that we still exist. So what we see now, this is a mistake I think we make too. When um oh yeah, yeah, definitely. My man Roland say that in Australia we're taught buying a house is better than buying a pair of Jordans or fancy cars. Love it. This is a brother who's been following me for a number of years, a supporter of mental dialogue. That's big. See, he's saying culturally that's what he learned. So see, this is the type of things. See, what happens is we have to bring some sense of culture back within our community to a certain extent, because we're missing aspects of it. And so, what I say, here's the fine line that we struggle with, in my personal opinion. The fine line that we struggle with is being able to establish standards, but make room for exceptions. Let me say that again. Being able to establish standards, but make room for exceptions. That's a huge fight in our community. Let me give you a real life example. So, as I said, today we were talking about black men oppressing women and gays. We didn't get to the gay part of the conversation. We'll do another show about it. But here's a perfect example of what I'm talking about. So, we know somebody else, let's see here, was saying I was raised. Yep, yeah, absolutely. Um, Absolutely, Mustafa. We gotta support it. We gotta speak to it. We gotta start this messaging. But yeah, definitely. See your thoughts. I wanted to respond to it. So what I was saying simply was that creating standards but making room for exceptions. So we know that there's a big fight with the LGBT community being recognized in this country or whatever around the world, but specifically in this country, right? So the issue with all isms typically is just a matter of respect. There's a lack of respect for one group, and then there's an ism that gets attached to it when you apply policies, which is the power part, right? So whether that be racism, lack of respect for us as black people, as humans, even sexism, lack of respect for women leads to policies against women or whatever. And so there's been times in this country in which there were policies against, gay couple, gay man being on the deathbed, couldn't have their gay lover, or a woman, same thing, couldn't have their gay lover in the hospital. These are system policy issues that we should smartly change, because there's a lack of respect there, right? So what happens is, once we got smart about being more respectful, so for example, so when we create the standard of marriage, knowing that that's better for our communities, so like the standard man and woman, in order to have children, birth their own children and things of that nature. So if we say, well, that's better for the community, that could be there shouldn't be no argument. That argument shouldn't even be an argument. Like, if we can agree that that's okay, then we should be able to make room and accept our gay brothers and sisters who are not going to fall into this group. Like accepting, meaning the standard is this is better for the community. There's no arguing that based on children. If we're worried about children, there's no arguing that this is better for children, right? So if we agree that that's better for children, then we shouldn't take any issue with our gay brothers and sisters who are not going to fit the standards. So this is what I mean by a cultural standard, but make room for the exceptions. What we have typically done is been intolerant of the exceptions. We've been disrespectful of those who don't fit it. Like, now we will go as far as to accuse the LGBT community as being a part of trying to break down the family structure. Like, there are elements of truth to that. I'm willing to say that as well. But the best place to be is say, here's the standard. And when somebody doesn't fit the standard, you kind of say that's okay too. But when we get into a cultural, ideological battle between, well, that standard, if we make that for everybody, it doesn't include me. And then the people that say it doesn't include me have to fight and say, well, you're going to include us. And then that fight turns into not creating a standard, because we're so worried about those who don't fit the standard. We're so worried about, well, if you create that standard, you're minimizing me. No, we can create the standard and be respectful of those who don't fit the standards. But there's nothing wrong with agreeing that more people need to be married in the black community, because so much can fall from it. So now back to the systematic issue, right? So, well, if we can all agree that what we're witnessing was very systematic, like, we can agree with that. We've been saying that for years. We can agree that it's extremely systematic that our black families are what they are, right? So how about one of the biggest fights, the biggest defense against the systematic attack is to get married anyway. Like when I show you the numbers, I mentioned them very early in this live. 8% of those children that are right now, currently, for the few black families that are married, 8% of those children grow up in poverty. That's it. The national standard is about 4 or 5%, right at almost at the regular standard. We don't have enough people married, so we got anywhere from a fourth to a third of our kids at any given time, based on job opportunities, are growing up in poverty. So just getting married and staying married sets you up to even fight the systematic attack. So once we accept that this systematic attack is taking place, then we should be encouraging marriage, not fighting marriage. We should, and so when I encourage marriage and when others encourage marriage, here's the biggest fight I get. Again, because I'm not married, you think I'm suggesting that marriage is easy. This live was supposed to stop, but people started piping in, so I kept going, right? So anyway, so when I propose it, because I haven't been married, I don't know what I'm talking about. I get it. Well, people say, well, we got to fix ourselves individually first. We got to fix ourselves individually first. Yes. No brainer. You know what we're doing while we're fixing ourselves or not fixing ourselves? Having babies. Like, that's okay. Like, so when I suggest marriage before children, people say, no, Montoya, no. You know, the first thing is fixing ourselves first. Okay, well, yeah, let's not have no babies while we fixing ourselves. Because that's who we hurting. Like, I'm not. See, when you think about doing it for legacy, when you think about marriage is wealth and you do it for the next generation. So when I say, quote, hashtag marriage before children, I'm absolutely saying, yeah, that brother or sister you about to lay down with, have you determined, are they worthy of raising your children? See, when that's the standard, then that changes. If it don't change who I lay down with, it damn sure change whether I put the condom on or not. Because that human nature, that lust, leading the way. Okay, yeah, you laying down, but we got too many that the baby popping up while we dysfunctional. And now you got to figure out if he going to stick around. Now you got to figure out, is your baby mama going to cause drama? Because we ain't waiting to have the children. So when I say marriage before children, I'm not saying any two dysfunctional people just get together and stay together. Heck no. Not saying that at all. Hashtag marriage before children. No, I'm saying it changes who you lay down with or how you lay down with them. It has to. Because, and what happens is it's something that even children can understand. So being a single mother, my mother tried to instill this in me. And then, hey, I at least protected myself all these years. Real talk. I at least did that. So what I'm saying is, when I say marriage before children, and I have these people that want to fight me on marriage, when they want to fight me on the marriage portion as if it didn't say before children, I know they missing the whole boat. Because, you know, marriage is in decline, and marriage was this patriarchal thing, and that patriarchal thing, you know, doesn't work. Well, here's the issue with all of that fight. It's destruction to our community, because what that fight, that's not ours, black community. That fight is not ours. That fight is not ours. With that fight, that argument, that feminism push for being able to do it yourselves and all of this kind of stuff, that push does not consider the literal real differences between us as men and women. It doesn't want to recognize it whatsoever. And so in not recognizing it, there's this encouragement for changing what marriage has looked like since the beginning of human existence. If there was just other better structure, we probably would see or have found another society that would have figured it out, that we could look to and say, well, damn, that's how they do it. Very different than this stuff we're doing. Now, if you know, when we start talking about black culture and African culture going back historically, we definitely got African cultures who have respectfully honored the woman for what she is as mother of the earth. So I will say, within westernized culture, which again, why that feminism movement is not our fight, will say it does not have a proper place for its woman. That's what we've watched happen in this United States of America, that movement that was for white women and white women alone. If you want to look at the real history, with that movement is because Western society, how in a sense how it sees its woman, is very different, and so that was a fight for them. Queens, you only got adopted for the numbers. in the 60s and the 70s. And it's been used against you, and you don't know it. Some of you do. Some of you do know the history. Some of you don't. I was a feminist until I learned the history myself, because I've always been about respecting. Um, oh, absolutely, Roland, you're absolutely right, man. Yeah, I know I can't be listened to till I get that woman, and doing it and saying and doing and trying to do and prove what I'm talking about. You know what I'm saying? I know all I could do is throw the information and realize it's not going to be fully accepted until I'm married too. So you're absolutely right, brother. I'm trying to find a man, and I'm not saying I got everything right, but I will say it is difficult in my mind, at least in my mind, to in a sense get a sister who understands that legacy part, or whatever. I'm getting attached to some groups that's kind of showing me how it's done, and I still got to get my game up too. So marriage before children, I'm following my own edit, right? Like I don't like people see me say it and think that I'm just saying just get married and stay married to whoever. No, I'm trying to get my shit together in order to, and I'm 44, so way behind the game. I hope I ain't missed the boat. But you can't tell me what I'm saying is wrong, even in not having followed suit, but definitely want to follow suit. And again, I'm not saying everybody can stay married once you whatever, but your best chance, if you go back to earlier in the video, 5 dice versus 2 dice. I want to start with 5 dice before I have these children. I want 5 dice. I want that to be my chances of how my kids come out when I roll them 5 dice versus 2 dices. That's where we at now. We rolling 2 dice. And when we was getting married, we had family, we were rolling 5 dice. Plus, it helps protect us against these systematic attacks. And if we get rid of these systematic attacks, then we're going to see a real legacy and a real rebirth that we got our fingers and crossing our fingers for. But when we culturally fight against good advice, such as marriage before children, not just for me. Again, I watch people encourage marriage, that are married, that are successful, and people don't want to listen to them either. All right, let me see what my man Mustafa said this time. Feminism is a byproduct of women being forced to be independent. Males must learn that sex without accountability is not an entitlement. Yeah, fair enough, brother. Yeah, like in my mind, the learning of that is encouraging marriage. Like we don't have a favorable look at marriage, because like what happens is, like when you say males must learn that sex without accountability is not an entitlement. Not disagreeing at all. I'm just thinking of messaging. We gotta come up with a mess. Like what we see now is messaging against our community coming together. Like I kind of mentioned that Jordan example. Why we line up for Jordans. There's a lot of messaging, a lot of advertisement paid to say these Jordans are what you need, and people line up for them. So I'm just saying that what you're saying is right. I'm just simply saying the easy wrap up is to wrap it up and be favorable about marriage. Our community doesn't have a favorable look at marriage. Society is having I know others who will say, thank you, Roland. I have others, women who will kind of look to, well, this is what's happening in society. So Montoya quit acting like this is a product of the Black community having a bigger issue when this is an issue within society, not favoring marriage. As I said earlier, I don't really give a shit what other communities are doing. Culturally, let's create standards, but make room for exceptions. I hope some of y'all heard that part earlier. That's the fine line that we are struggling with in any conversation. Creating a standard, but being tolerant of exceptions. Historically, we have not been tolerant of exceptions. People who do not fit the standards, they are okay. Every child that comes in this world may not fit a standard, but there are good standards that we can encourage, such as being married, stay together. These are things that we can encourage in the community, and should be able to agree that that's better for our community than what we're currently doing. Because this is what people who argue against this idea of marriage being so important, or that I'm making marriage too big of a solution or big or catch-all or whatever. For people that are making that argument against me, what they never realize is You're really arguing for what we're currently doing. And nobody can tell me that what we're currently doing is okay. Or they think of the exceptions. They think of the people that turned out very well in single parent homes. They exist. But please know that is the exception. But they don't like that there's an exception. Because they know a lot of people that were successful in single parent homes. I'm not saying you don't. But the numbers don't lie either. Numbers don't lie. Yeah, I know statistics can say anything you want them to say, I don't like the census. Everybody doesn't take the census. You're right. Ain't that far off either. Ain't nobody else got an extensive number. So yes, in your relative circle, because we hang around people who are like ourselves, cool that the single dad is doing his thing. Cool that the single mother is doing his things. I got numbers that show me married couples is killing us. So let's jump in that group. But again, not being dismissive of that it's easy to get married. Hell, if it was easy, I would be married already. I got to get my own dysfunction right. I'm owning it. Let's all own it. Just don't bring no babies while we dysfunctional though. Like, that's not a... You're right, Roland. The truth is repulsive to many. Look, like when I say let's not bring no babies before we get right personally, that's not an attack. That's not a judgment. But if we create the standard saying, here's the standard, then, oh, this is dope. My dad say your son told you we are rich because we have family. He's absolutely right. He's absolutely right. Marriage is wealth in all levels, cultural, capital. It's wealth in so many ways. And keep fighting, Queen. Keep fighting. It's worth it. It's worth it. The damage done outside of that structure. If for anybody that sizes me up as I get sized up for my community. My mother, Phyllis Smith, shout out. Right, he's 10 years old saying that. I love it. You teach them right, Queen. My mother, Phyllis Smith, gets big ups for how, quote unquote, how I turned out from my neighborhood. Big ups. And she deserves every bit of that big ups. She did an amazing job. Set standards, expectations for me. I love her to death. Love her to death. So I'm not indicting nobody when I come from the situation, but let's be okay with the standard and not take the standard so personal. Let's agree that we can move forward with our children meeting the standard. Yeah, they're like let's hear this. I'm gonna go hard with it. When you create a standard, then there should be some shame associated with not meeting the standard. Like, okay, what's already done is done. So I'm not trying to make anybody feel bad that I already done messed up. But if we're going to create a cultural standard, then shame, which we hate shame in today's time. But when I watch the Asian culture whose out of wedlock number is 17%, not to make a huge comparison, but one thing that's very much a part of their culture is it's shameful to bring a baby outside of wedlock. Shame has its place in creating a standard. Now, we can't, and we shouldn't. Here's a mistake when I said we got to be able to create a standard, make room for the exceptions. We have not done good with that as a community in the past. My mother's a perfect example. Let's go hard with it. So, mother has me at 14 at a time in a small town, first teenage pregnancies. Another sister followed right behind her. A good friend I grew up with. First 2 teenage pregnancies. So, church preached the standards. No out of wedlock, no whatever. Wasn't common where I was from. So, she does that, right? 14, my father's 17 or whatever, right, at the time. So big shame. Big shame to the point where they bring this 13-year-old at the time, she had me at 14. Bring this 13-year-old at the time in front of the church. 13-year-old got to ask the whole church for forgiveness. Hell no. Hell no. That's having a standard, but not making room for the exception. See, what we got to do today, create the standard, make room for the exception. Ain't no way you put a 13-year-old in front of a church. Embarrass her. It still sits with her. I know my mother very well. Grew up with her. It still sits with her, even if she won't own it. It still sits with her. She never forgot it. So now, when you try to create a standard, people assume the shame, so they fight against it. No. Create the standard and be accepting of those who don't want to get married. That's okay. So when you push for marriage now, then people push back and be, everybody shouldn't, I just want to have the right not to get married. You do. That's making room for the exception. But to generalize and say we need these babies inside of families, then we need to pass that message, explain to our children it's much better. And if you're a single parent, and if you did very well with your child by yourself, imagine what it would have been like with help. Make sure your child knows that with good help. Not necessarily their particular parent if they wasn't involved or not involved enough, but let your kid know, even if you did your thing by yourself. Like, let's imagine with two people what doing your thing could be. We all understand and long for it. So make sure your child knows. Yeah, mama did good or dad did good on his own, which, hopefully you got a good co-parenting situation. And even when it's a good co-parenting situation, teach them for legacy purposes. You want to do it together. You want to stay together. I'm going to give one last example and then I'm really out. Again, it's just, I'm rambling now. A lot of stuff coming to my mind. I thought about this. I never said this to anybody. But I've seen, all right, this is, got to go, okay, hold on. Y'all starting to ask me questions. Every time I have to get off, y'all start asking me questions. It says, what's your definition of marriage? Sorry if I missed that already. Just literally, two people committing for life. In America, definitely get the paper. It financially makes sense to get the paper. I've seen a couple of blended situations where maybe the paper wasn't financially beneficial, but that was really kind of on a yearly basis tax-wise. But for a passing down of legacy in America, get the paper too. So my definition of is lifelong commitment to a significant other who you intend to stay with and raise children. So that would be my definition, Roland. And then for people that be like, well, the paper don't mean nothing, BS. Just BS in the sense, well, if you stand with it for life, why not get all the benefits that come with the paper? And it definitely makes passing down wealth easy, very easy. Yeah, can you get stuff in place without the paper? Yeah. The example I was about to bring up, P. Diddy has enough money to put the trust and get the things in place. I've seen somebody make a good argument for, him being so wealthy that marriage made, his situation, marriage probably didn't make the best sense. When I first heard that, I was kind of against it, but then I started thinking, okay, well, maybe similar to, like maybe in Islam where you'll see the Quran lays out that if it recommends one wife, if you don't know how the Quran in that sense, it recommends one wife, but in laying out the parameters for having multiple wives, be able to provide for them equally. So to a certain extent, we might can look at a Diddy as such, having it's, we don't know if you've seen if you follow Diddy on Instagram or whatever, but this past holiday season, I think it was, he had all the mothers of his children, all the children, they all hung out and ate together or whatever. And he was just talking about how good his life was, and he's got his longtime girlfriend. So they were all hanging out together. And so to a certain extent, he's financially able to do that. And so again, somebody made this argument that, for a man with money, that might be the better way to go. And they made a good argument at the time, sister I really respect. And at the time I couldn't really negate her. But as I've thought about this more and been attached to these other groups, I started going, well, for his legacy purposes, though, for his legacy, again, I know this brother got trust to protect the money, and his family should be good for another generation, at least one more generation. Hopefully enough money to last more than one generation. And I know he does a great job with his kids. He's involved, and it looks like he's bringing them along in the business. Well, who better to learn from within that business? For the ones that are going in that business, who better to learn from than him? So he's creating a legacy in that sense because of how he's raising the children. But I thought about this one day, and I'm gonna bring it to the table right now, which was, but if all of his children follow his lead, what if not? I mean, I'm not trying to just create an extreme, but look what he's shown his children. I'm talking about as far as having several baby mothers and lots of children. He wants more children. Hopefully with Cassie. That's his plan if he has more children, right? But he has plenty of children with, I think, two to three baby mothers? I forget. But at least two baby mothers. I think it's three, right? The children. What if his sons, who he's grooming and teaching very well, not arguing, but what if they follow his lead? So he has a trust that's laid out. If they follow his lead, then that wealth that he's built in this generation, they're going to have to spread it out amongst their future baby mothers if they follow their dad's lead. And he has several sons. Because right now he takes care of all of his baby mothers very well, from what I could tell. I'm not saying they don't do anything. I don't know what they do, but he definitely has done his thing and takes care of them and is capable of doing. So I'm not knocking what he's capable of doing. He's clearly capable of doing it. But again, when we start thinking about legacy purposes, what if his children follow his lead? What's the chances? How long can his money last if they too marry one wife, accumulate the money, learn it? You say hopefully they make money like him. Yeah, he's teaching them yet, but you think about it, he still has to spread his money between 3 or 4 families. But if his children marry their one wife, look how much longer the money goes generationally. And I'm talking about, because what happens is when you say hopefully they make money like him, I want to give a deeper perspective. So what happens is, my brother Mark Ranger always talks about this. So in the black community, we unfortunately continue to restart each generation. We bootstrap each generation. We even psychologically sometimes go as far as to say, well, I had to go through it, my kids will too. Well, when you start marrying for generational wealth and for legacy, then it actually you should be doing it on the shoulders of the previous generation. So yes, I hope they make money like him as well. But can you understand that if they do make money like him and there's one family line based on them marrying and staying married, how much longer the money goes generationally? Just throwing it out. I'm not saying I got the answers here. And again, maybe your Diddy can get away with it. Most of us are not Diddy, right? But I'm just kind of trying to show that from a legacy standpoint, here's a real risk if they follow his lead and spread their seeds between three or 4 baby mothers, right? If all of his sons do that and they are financially set and have to, are pulling from his trust and got to carry that business on or whatever the case may be, that family business, if that's what they choose to do, and doing it and spreading it that thin, that money can be gone. See, we want to be rich, but rich can be gone. Rich is gone in one generation. So I'm fighting to make it out. Absolutely. That's what I'm just throwing it out. Again, sister made a great argument for about people with brothers with that type of money might not want to get married. At the time, I conceded her argument was better than what I was initially saying. But then I thought about this the other day when we started thinking about what marriage is really for. And again, he may get it right, but the chances, if they follow his lead, it definitely makes it difficult to ensure, in a sense, we think of the Rockefeller passed down, these legacies of people who've passed it down for generationally. So when we start thinking on that level, then understand that generational wealth requires marriage. Like, there ain't no running from that. It requires it. Because let's say I'm not fortunate enough to get married, and I hit a lick with building the mental dialogue communities. I should say hit a lick, but I get enough of y'all to buy in and support what we're doing to the extent that I'm doing very well for myself, and I'm getting sponsorships and support, and so I'm making my living from, for example, from helping our community, which is my goal, right? So I'm making my living. I'm doing very well for myself. I'm learning how to, from my financial advisor, how to stack money and these type of things, and build up a nice nest egg, right? So let's say I build up this nice nest egg and I don't have children. It's gone. One generation. See, rich can be gone in one generation. Wealth continues to pass down. That requires marriage. Can you go find the exception of somebody's wealth being passed down outside of marriage? Yeah, you can go find the exceptions. But how do the other families do it? How has it been done? We got a path that's tried and true, but we out here fighting to be the exception. Whack on many things. We go to the exception as the new standard, and all that new standard is a bunch of dysfunction that we trying to normalize or already have normalized. So the only way we gonna flip this is to start speaking to things that are better for the community. Create standards. Create standards. Make room for the exceptions. We don't do that very well. Hopefully these conversations we keep having at the Mental Dialogue Community Club and on the show every Saturday morning, 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you don't have the Stitcher app, go download the Stitcher app and look up Mental Dialogue. You can go hear the old shows. Last week's show was amazing when we were saying our Black women torn between gender and race. Amazing conversation. Just me doing a lot of listening. The men were doing a lot of listening. We need to learn from our sisters, respect our sisters, listen to our sisters. You hear me this week, though. Cool, Dexy. Yeah, go back and listen to the beginning. I was rambling for the first 3-4 minutes, whatever. But yeah, I hope it's more. I think it's some more stuff to catch. But it's But this week it'll sound like I'm going against the ladies. With like me and Christy almost got off the air with me today. She was so upset. So it was good. Check it out. Today's show was, do black men oppress women and gays? We didn't get to the gay conversation. We'll do it at another time. So I done rambled on. I hope I said some stuff that makes sense. Tell people, share it with your friends. I got to get better at going live. I got to build a Mental Dialogue Community Club up. I hope people start to see the value in what we're doing. People that have been, I know, right, Desi, the people that have been following today, most of you are supportive of what we do. Roller, I still owe you a t-shirt. Forgive me, brother. I've kind of been doing too much myself. So we're going to get these t-shirts. I done went through 4 companies, man, and hadn't been able to get it right. And so one company, got me some shirts or whatever. So I don't want to say every. I'm just saying at a way that I can do it feasibly for the limited funds. But thanks for the people that are supportive, at this point. If anything, if you know what we're doing on the Saturday morning shows, or you're here in Atlanta, go to mentaldialogue.com and at least become a supporter before the prices go up. It's $2 a month to be a supporter, $5 to be a member. If you're in Atlanta, you really should be a member. There are some. Thank you, Roland. Definitely some benefits to being a member. If you have a business and you want to promote your to our platform, reach about 6,500 via social media. Between all of our social media formats, the radio show reaches about 1,000 to 2,000 a month. I'm proud to say over the past week we had about 1,000 listeners, so that was pretty cool. So that lets me know we're doing something right. We had some technical difficulties on the show today, so wasn't able to get it. Only take one caller, so I hated that because I know people wanted to get in on this show. But yeah, me and Christy just banged it out. No commercials, one call in. So, nah, it's all good, King. So yeah, I'm glad y'all getting, for people that's telling me I'm doing something right. Appreciate y'all. Tell people about Mental Dialogue. Share. You know, if you think about how Garvey built his organization, we're gonna have mental dialogue community clubs all over the world. That day is really coming. Even though I've been preaching it for way too long, I do believe I'm gonna get the support to be able to expand it. Everybody in Atlanta, quit doing it just for yourself. Like, let's support. I ain't asking for a lot. It's only $5 a month. So we're gonna bump that up. So I need to bump it up in order to expand it. We got to expand it. More people in our community need to be having these real conversations so that we can create standards and make room for the exceptions. That's it. My name is Montoya Smith, aka Black Socrates. All I ask is that you think. I'm gone.